Welcome to MLS Roundup from We Are Soccer. I'm Craig Hearn. All right, today we'll be chatting about MLS playoffs, which have provided some big upsets, to say the least. As usual, I'm joined by our MLS expert and soccer syndicate scout, Brooks Laimbeer. Brooks, how goes it, my friend?
Good. Some exciting games, as I said last week. The chaos of the MLS playoffs and not knowing what is going to happen with the new new format they installed a few years ago with the kind of one and done format like they do in an NCAA tournament. So this is made for some very exciting matches, and I'm looking forward to kind of recapping and then talking about the ones down the road.
You can say that again, man. It has brought about some games that you and I had predicted some winners, and that didn't happen. 3 out of the 4 games had provided over the past week have provided upsets. So we had SKC losing to Real Salt Lake. We had Colorado being downed 1-0 by Portland Timbers, and New England tying NYFCFC 2-2, but then losing 5-3 on PKs. And obviously the Revs with Bruce Arena setting the mark for most points in an MLS season, winning the Supporters Shield, proving once again that doesn't matter what you do in the regular season because that's their first game in the playoffs, and then they lost. The big key with them was they hadn't played for 23 days. They finished the regular season. They had so much time off because of international break, and they got to bye through the first round. Do you think that is why they lost that game to NYCFC, or was NYCFC just better? What are your thoughts on that one, man?
I think it's a bit of both. So the time off in the 23 days of not playing competitive soccer and just waiting and training and guys going off to their national teams coming back, you're kind of anxious to play. And I know there's kind of been some buzz. Well, maybe instead of doing, having a bye for for the 1 seed, maybe it's a 1-8 matchup. Maybe they put, 16 teams in the playoffs and, in the future years instead of 14. Just so that team doesn't wait 23 days or 10 days or more to play, depending on if there's international breaks and such. So it was a little bit of both. I mean, look at NYCFC did very well against Atlanta at home in the game prior. And, you and I were talking about this. They kind of faded a bit, and then they caught fire at the end of the season. And like I mentioned, and it's very similar to college soccer when you go into the playoffs, the teams that catch fire and figure it out and feel good going into the tournament or the playoffs, magic happens. And boy, oh boy, was that quite a game with NYCFC and the Revs. 1-1 early in the game, and then late in the second half, NYCFC and Castellanos with the header, beating DeJuan Jones just barely at the back post. And then Castellanos getting the red card by going studs into Brandon By. So the two, another Michigan guy there went to Western Michigan, DeJuan to Michigan State, and then Tajon Buchanan with the wonderful finish. Very composed in the box, didn't hit it hard, just nice and easy off the volley and placed it in the back of the net. And then, boy, PK is just Sean Johnson coming with a huge save, and Matt Turn missing just by a little bit on a few of them. And man, it was a good game. And then you had the drama at the end with Tavon Gray, the right back, with the injuries and kind of going out to the sideline, coming back in, couldn't really move, and they were down to 10 men. So that game, I think some of us said it started off a little slow, but then it kind of picked up as it went, and it was a good one.
Yeah, that game had a little bit of everything. I want to hit upon something you mentioned there. NYCFC didn't have the greatest regular season, but as you said, they got hot towards the end of the season. They got into the playoffs. They got in. They cemented their place, and they really started to gel. And there's been a long debate for years and years and years about momentum, right? Momentum. Does it actually do anything in a game? Does it actually do anything in a season? Yeah, I mean that they've caught fire. They beat Atlanta 2-0. Then they play the number 1 team in the MLS, down them at home, and they're a tough team to beat. NYCFC have done really well. So it's you're right. That game had a little bit of everything, and the momentum going in has really carried them through. Yep. One of the other games that we want to chat about, SKC downed 2-1 by Real Salt Lake. Real Salt Lake obviously beat Seattle in the first round without any shots on goal. Right? They get through, they get into penalties, they win there, they get into this game. You and I believe it was last week when we said, okay, well, SKC will take this. Real Salt Lake, it was a nice run. You've done very well this year. Good job, but it can't go any further. And I mean, SKC at home, go ahead and lose 2-1. That last goal, the winning goal, Justin Merrim, Michigan guy, making a heck of a run and a nice cross, and Bobby Wood
Bobby
for the
Wood
finish.
with the
Yeah, man,
finish,
Bobby
like
Wood,
the
man.
former men's national team guy
Yeah,
that was kind of going nowhere in Germany. And
yep,
I mean, I hope he revitalizes his career in
yep,
MLS. He's still got some years left, but I mean, that's why you bring him to RSL and he comes off the bench. He was dealing with some injuries when they brought him in and when they brought him on and earlier in the season. And that's why you have a guy like that. And it
yep.
was a very top class finish from Bobby Wood, but a great cross and drive down to the end line by Justin Merrim, who's
Yeah, I
been
mean,
a great player off the bench for him.
yeah, he really has. And I got to be honest, that game, I was thoroughly entertained. I watched most of that game and was just like, I found myself about halfway through the game or towards the end going, I can't believe this is an MLS game. This is on high level soccer, and it was really enjoyable.
Mhm.
We've said before, there's definitely a distinction between EPL and MLS, right? If
Mhm.
you're watching MLS and you're expecting EPL quality, you're not going to get it and you're not going to enjoy it. But if you look at the MLS as a whole and just kind of take it for what it is,
Yep.
it's very entertaining. But I found myself in that game being thoroughly entertained and going, the level of soccer in this game is actually really good right now.
Yeah.
Both teams playing well, both teams having chances, going up and down, back and forth. And in the end, RSL, Real Salt Lake, just pulling it out, man. What a great game.
Yeah, and credit to RSL too, because there was no Albert Rusnak, and they had to kind of move Damir Kreilach into a higher position as a center forward in the front two, and
Mm-hmm.
and he was dropping down a lot to try to make the game a bit, but Pablo Mastroeni wanted him to stay higher, so he could be close to the goal. So playing a full forward two isn't the sexiest thing, but at least they push the outside backs to get forward to put pressure on it, SKC to push him back so they didn't have the ball the whole time,
Yep.
like Seattle had the ball the whole time against them. So, credit to Pablo Mastroeni. And then again, like we talked about, I mean, RSL is playing for something more than just themselves. It's for
Yep.
everything that's happened, with the organization and the owner and the past owner with Deloy Hansen and the city and the fans. And, I think there's something to be said when you're playing for something more than yourselves. It's a very scary team to want to play against. So I will say this, I will say the Portland Timbers are not looking past what RSL has done to get into the playoffs and then what they've done the first and second round. So that's going to be an interesting matchup between RSL and Portland.
Great point, man. Well, let's talk about the game that led to Portland getting there. And that was Colorado at home to Portland Timbers, and that was a Thanksgiving Day afternoon game. It was on 4:30 Eastern time.
Got good views.
It did. I've
Yeah.
also actually heard last night that the numbers represented by MLS were false. Unfortunately, I had heard the original
It
number
wasn't
that came out.
7. It was like over 1 million, wasn't it?
Yeah, the original number that came out was like 7.1 or 7.2 million people in the country watched that game, and someone had typoed the number, and it was actually like 1.2 or 1.5 million.
That's still pretty good though.
That is still pretty good, and I was one of those
Thanksgiving
people. Yeah,
football and everything
yep,
else that's on. Yeah.
yep. I was one of those people. I told my father-in-law, I'm like, hey, before we watch this football game, can I just throw something on real quick? And he expected me to watch 10 minutes of something, and the soccer game's on. He looked at me, he's like, yeah, all right, why not? Let's just watch this. So
Yeah.
we watched that, and it was an entertaining game. Portland Timbers come away with a 1-0 win over Colorado. What were your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we were at our friend's house, so I only got to watch the first probably 15, 20 minutes of it. But I mean, it was kind of, I think the way that like when I saw the highlights and just how people talked about the game, I think it was kind of to be expected. It was going to be a very hard fought
Yeah,
game. It might be a little up and down, but it was going to be a very close game because they're two very well coached teams,
yep,
good tactical managers with solid players. And credit to Laris Mabiala, at the end of the game to, off the rebound, just to stick his foot out there and come around and swipe it into the goal. And off the corner, and to give Portland the 1-0 win in the 93rd minute. So I mean, it's tough to play in Colorado with the altitude, and luckily it wasn't as cold and snowy as it could be.
Yeah.
That's tough. And then I think what was tough with Portland overcome is when Blanco went out.
Yep.
I mean, Blanco's been such a key player, and if Portland probably had him for the whole entire year, obviously coming off his injury, his ACL injury the prior year, we could be talking, they could have had a higher seed, and, we could be talking a different story of positive or negative, but Blanco means so much to that team, and the role he plays. He can play as a winger, he can play as a midfielder, he's creative. He's such a big part of their, their system they play. Yep. So, that was a little, with him going out, that's very questionable, and he's questionable for the next game. So, yep. But I mean, credit to Portland for getting the 1-0 win, and it was a hell of a season for Colorado. They just have to make maybe a few adjustments, and they can probably get back to the same position they are next year. Now it's MLS. It's not going to say that we can look at the number 1 overall seed next year in the Western Conference, because we have the LA Galaxy, and we'll see what moves LAFC makes with hiring a coach, and obviously you have Seattle, then Portland, and everyone. So it'll be tough, but they're in a good position if they can keep their roster around, to do well next year.
I agree. Well, let's look at the matchups that are coming up here. So the conference finals in the West is Portland taking on RSL, Portland at home there. And then in the East, Philadelphia Union at home to NYCFC. Those games are being played this upcoming weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I mean, those are going to be entertaining games, right? Let's start with the Western Conference. Portland at home to Real Salt Lake. What are you expecting from that game?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, as I stated, because I don't think Blanco's going to play, because I imagine that if maybe he can play, if he's cleared, maybe he's brought off the bench, or they wait and say, hey, like, we'll use you in the, the MLS playoff, for MLS Cup. Because we don't want to risk you tearing your ACL or something happen again where you have another major injury and a setback. So, I think that's something they need to be cautious about if he's going to play, if he has a chance to play or doesn't. So, but you're looking at a game at Providence Park, that's a very difficult place to go in and win. But you're looking at, again, an RSL team that's, on fire, had to scrap their way into the playoffs, as I've mentioned, and has been 2 very tough teams. So, like Gio Savarese said in his press conference earlier this week, is we're not overlooking them. We know what they are. They're a good team. They work hard. They work well together. So it's going to be an interesting match. And the key thing for Portland is if they can continue their streak of playing well in the back line, and not making mistakes. But the key thing is, who's going to replace Blanco, and then Asprilla with the red card is you've lost 2 attackers. So, who's going to play? Is it going to be Marvin Loria coming off the bench? Is it maybe you move, you put George Fashive in there with Chara and Paredes. And then you find, someone, like I said, a Loria, and then someone else, like you move like a Mora and Niazgoda, you can move Niazgoda out wide or more out wide, or do something, I think Gio's got to be creative with what he's probably looking to do. Whereas RSL, it'll be interesting to see if they get Rusnak back, because then that changes the game for them a little bit too. So, and then, you have the 20-year-old villain at RSL. David Ochoa. Credit for him want to take on the villain role, and it's a role that we would like to see a little more of MLS, because it gives it a little spice to the league when a guy takes on a villain role. But can David Ochoa, come up big as he has the past 2 rounds, and then at the end of the season, because he's shown that he's made very bad errors in the season. So. Big match can come up big again. So he's
almost due for an error, but you're right. He's almost relishing that villain role.
Yes. Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting game. So I think it'll be close, but I think Portland will edge them out just by.
I was about to say I'm going to press you here and ask for a prediction, but you think Portland are going to edge out RSL and their Cinderella story kind of comes to an end, right? Because that's what they've had so far through the playoffs. So, all right. Well, on the east side, Philadelphia are home to NYCFC. That's a 3:00 kickoff on Sunday, December 5th. All right, man. Give me that game's on ESPN, by the way. Or, I'm sorry, on ABC, national ABC. So that'll be a nationally televised game right there. Give me your prediction on and thoughts on that game. Is NYCFC going to get it done, or the Union going to be too strong and take this one?
Yeah, again, it's tough to win in Philadelphia, right? I mean, they do well at home. They've got a good system in place. They have good chemistry. The lineup doesn't change a whole lot. They have guys they can bring off the bench, young academy players, some veterans. I mean, and again, I think between the 4 goalkeepers that are left in this MLS playoffs, you have one of the best ones in the league, and Andre Blake, that can win you games, which he did last time in the last round against Nashville, in PKs. So, yeah, NYCFC's on a hot streak though. So, but no Castellanos because this is because of his stupid foul on Brandon By in the previous round. So you lose the MLS Golden Boot winner in Castellanos. So how do you replace him? And you had some guys with injury. You're on shorter rest. You've just played 120 minutes and then went into PKs. So I think Philly liked that game against Revs because it went longer than it needed to go. So it's shorter, turnaround. So, I mean, I'm thinking if Castellanos had not got that red card, I think NYCFC could have edged him out, but I think that really hurts them. And along with probably them, needing to recover from that match against the Revs. So I would say Philly squeaks this one out and wins.
I'm going to have to side with you there. I wanted to disagree so bad. I really want to see NYCFC get through, but you're right. I think there's going to be shorthanded enough to the point where they can't get the ball in the back of the net, and Philadelphia edge just went out either 1-0 or 2-1. I see the Union going on. Originally, when we did our MLS brackets a couple of weeks back, I had the Union going all the way to the finals, but I'm going to like I said, I want to pick NYCFC the way they've been playing. I think they've got the momentum going. They've been playing well, but without Castellanos and their streak comes to an end here. The momentum gets them this far and no further. I think Union take it and get to the MLS Cup. So I think I'll side with you on that one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, either way, these games, the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference semifinal games, let's put that up again. They're going to be great games. So the winners of these games go on and play in the MLS Cup final, and that'll be on Saturday, December 11th.
Yep.
9:00 kickoff on ABC. So another nationally televised game. So that'll be fun. Well, we've got a lot to look forward to this weekend with these games coming up. And then we'll have to get there next week and chat about that final, and we'll break down the teams that make it through into that final game, right? That's what we'll have to do because that's fun. Why wouldn't we do that, right?
Exactly.
All right, Brooks. Well, man, I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week, and we'll see if our predictions this week come true, because last week they definitely did not. So we'll have to see if we did any better next week when we get back together.
Yes, and they're doing in our predictions. Hopefully, they're better than how our brackets are doing right now in our MLS bracket challenge. So
yeah, definitely. We're supposed to be the experts on this, but it's not really looking that way in our bracket challenge. So let's not tell too many people about that. All right, man. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Always love the wisdom and insight you bring, and we'll talk to you next week, buddy.
Sounds good. Looking forward to next week.
All right, man. Cheers.
Cheers.